Your Excellencies, good morning.
Hello, good afternoon. How are you?
Very well, sir. Nice to see you. And Ambassador, very nice to see you.
Yeah.
I think we're in your hands, Fahad.
Hello, Alistair. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay.
Good to see you.
Okay, I guess we will begin shortly with opening remarks from His Excellency the Ambassador, but just double checking on audio and video.
I can hear you loud and clear.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, loud and clear.
Very good. Thank you. Well, good afternoon, everybody.
Hi, Ambassador.
Hello, Khan, Abdulaziz.
Hello.
Great to be with
Alistair.
you.
Well,
Ambassador, Your Excellency, nice to see you.
thank you for joining us.
A great pleasure.
Fahad, shall we start, or are we still waiting for anybody?
No, I believe we're good to go. We'll have two additional comments. I'll add them as I see them, and we're good to go, Your Excellency.
Alistair, Khan, Abdulaziz, if you allow me to start, is that okay?
Yes,
Go
indeed.
ahead.
Ambassador.
Thank you. Well, Excellencies, fellow participants, I'm delighted to welcome you all to this Embassy's online event as we analyze and discuss the Abraham Accords and their profound implications for the future of the Middle East and our region's interaction with the wider world. May I start by sincerely thanking our guest speakers, former Foreign Office Minister Alistair Burt, who has kindly agreed to be our moderator for this debate, and former Bahraini Ambassador in London, His Excellency Sheikh Abdulaziz bin Mubarak Al Khalifa, and the Daily Telegraph's defense editor and chief foreign affairs columnist, Khan Copeland. We are truly fortunate to have such a diverse and deep pool of experience to draw on today, and I'm greatly looking forward to hearing your insights on how these developments will shape the future of our region and beyond. May I also thank all of you for being part of this event and express the hope you will find in today's discussion and analysis useful in informing your views on the Middle East future. So, without ado, I would like to hand over to our first speaker, His Excellency Sheikh Abdulaziz bin Mubarak Al Khalifa. Abdulaziz.
Yeah, well, I didn't think I was going to go first, but here goes. I mean, if I'm going to just give an overview on what I think of where we are, I really believe that the playbook has to change. It has to be rewritten in terms of what's going on in this part of the world. It's been 72 years since the Palestinians and the Israelis have been given a chance to solve their own issue on their own. Yet we have been faced with such huge challenges where I think we can't wait another 70 years for their problem to be solved, for us to actually, not face up to the dangers that are facing us. And those dangers, I think, can be overcome if the Palestinian-Israeli solution is solved, because in that case, we can work hand in hand with the Israelis. And That's where we are now and how we're going to make best use of it. And look, and not to forget, also in solving the Palestinian issue. So we've got our task cut out for us, but there are so many ways that we can actually benefit from these Abraham Accords. Thank you.
I want to thank His Excellency Sheikh Abdul Aziz for that overview of where we stand and Bahrain's view on that. I'd like now to turn to Con Cothran, if I may. Con is a distinguished defence and foreign affairs analyst now with the Daily Telegraph. He has long and wide experience in the Middle East, beginning with the Lebanese Civil War, and has travelled and written extensively a series of excellent books covering the region, as well as, I'm sure he wouldn't be surprised if I said, trenchant analysis of the rights and wrongs in the situation and what's going on. I can't think of a better analyst to look at where the Accords are, what they mean, and how we go forward than Con. So the floor is yours, my friend. Muted, Con. Muted. There you go.
Right, thank you. Well, thank you, Alistair, for that very kind and generous introduction. I'll try to live up to your expectations. As a journalist, I feel I've sort of lived the recent convulsion surrounding the Arab-Israeli peace process for the last 30 years or so. I mean, I was very much involved with the PLO when Arafat was gradually nudging towards recognizing the two-state solution in the 80s. I was in the region during the Oslo Accords. And of course, there was enormous expectation after the Oslo Accords were announced in 1993. And particularly in the Palestinian territories. I remember driving over to have dinner in Ramallah from Jerusalem to see Palestinian friends, a journey you could not do today. You could go over and have dinner in Ramallah, come back to Jerusalem in the evening without any interference from anybody of the Israeli security forces. But then, of course, the whole thing unraveled. And when you look back on this, when you look at why the peace process that had such high hopes in 1993 disappeared virtually, you have to look at not only the assassination of Yitzhak Rabin in 1995, but the way that the extremist wing of the Palestinian movement behaved, with an endless succession of suicide bombings on buses in Tel Aviv and Jerusalem, which I remember covering as a journalist. And you just see the whole edifice of the Oslo Accords collapse as sort of militant Islam interfered with a process that otherwise had high hopes for the region. I remember talking to Shimon Peres, the former Israeli prime minister, who had this vision for a unified Middle East where it would be possible one day to drive from Tel Aviv to Bahrain. He was talking about this back in the 90s, and we all thought he was a bit mad. And fast forward to today in the Abraham Accords, and I really feel that what the Trump administration has achieved is picking up the baton of where we were back in the mid-90s, and that the impasse that sort of settled on the whole process from the mid-90s till today has now got a whole new momentum. And we've had the historic signings in Washington with Bahrain, the United Arab Emirates, and then Sudan joining in, with the prospect of other countries showing enormous interest in following this very bold initiative by the Gulf states. And this really is, as Sheikh Abdulaziz intimated, this is sort of changing the playbook for the better. I mean, this is a very positive move for the region, but it's not one without challenges, because I think when you look at the Middle East today, what the Abraham Accords have done is redefine the political landscape of the region between those countries, like the Gulf states, that are taking a pragmatic and responsible approach to the future of the region. And then you've got the other side of the divide, the sort of backward-looking rejectionist states like Turkey, Syria, Qatar, Iran, who are totally opposed not just to the Abraham Accord, but to any kind of concept of progress in the region that encompasses a relationship with Israel, which is so negative and it is so backward looking that you do feel very strongly, I feel very strongly, that it makes them on the wrong side of history. And these are the challenges that the new administration in Washington will have to face. There's been a lot of speculation recently that the Biden administration will want to revive the JCPOA with Iran. Biden is coming in with a very bold agenda to reverse a lot of the Trump administration's policies, rejoining the WHO, etc. And the JCPOA is part of this Biden realignment that is anticipated. But I don't think that's going to be so easy. And I think the Biden administration, when it takes office, is going to find that the landscape of the Middle East is very different to the one that he was used to when he was vice president under Barack Obama and trying to sort out the JCPOA, flawed as it was. We've got a very emergent Turkey, which has made no secret of its backing for the Islamist cause, for the Muslim Brotherhood and other kinds of extremist organizations. We've got Iran reviving its nuclear aspirations, and in quite a sinister way. I mean, when the IAEA, a UN body that temperamentally does not like to get involved in conflict, says that Iran is now clearly breaching the deal. It's got 12 times the amount of enriched uranium that it should have under the terms of the deal. It's activated a new modernized centrifuges to enrich uranium. It's building new underground complexes around the Natanz facility to house these facilities. I mean, these are the actions of a country that is completely moving away from any kind of rapprochement with the West and its allies in the region. And I think it's going to make it very difficult for Biden. And I think the assassination of the Iranian scientist over the weekend was very much a reaction, whoever did it, to what the Iranians are up to. So, you know, the Abraham Accord is a very positive step, and those countries that have embraced it and are looking for a progressive future for the Middle East should be applauded. And the challenge that lies ahead is what to do with rejectionist states that are backward looking and do not want peace at any cost.
Thank you very much, Con. That was very helpful and very useful. And I know there'll be a number of comments afterwards. Could I just say to those who are participating, there is a Q&A function on Zoom. Please use this. I think for reasons of speed and time, it would be easier if I'm able to ask the questions on your behalf, but I'd be very keen to see some questions in that Q&A function. So after all our speakers have finished, then we can have an opportunity to use those questions to bring out even more about this, about the subject that we're discussing and its implications. So please feel free to use that. It's now my great pleasure to invite Her Excellency Huda Nanu, who is the former Bahrainian ambassador to Washington, DC, and Bahrain's first Jewish Arab ambassador, to say a few words about her interpretation of what has been the situation. Your Excellency, thank you very much for joining us. You're very welcome. You have the floor.
Thank you, Your Honor, Mr. Alistair Burt. basically, Bahrain is committed to peace as a strategic alternative and to launch initiatives aimed at fostering international cooperation, stability, and prosperity in the Middle East. The Regional Peace Initiative is a priority for the government of Bahrain. The government has made serious efforts to ensure the success of the initiative in line with the kingdom's pivotal role in achieving peace. Bahrain is keen to cooperate with Israel in various fields based on the inherent values of pluralism and peaceful coexistence, deeply rooted in the Bahraini community, and the kingdom's firm belief in the need for cooperation to promote peace in the Middle East. The bilateral talks addressed issues of shared interest aiming to achieve stability in the region, especially in light of the escalating challenges of terrorism and extremism and the growing need to enhance the culture of dialogue and mutual understanding. On September 11th, the Kingdom of Bahrain announced that it was joining the United Arab Emirates in recognizing the State of Israel. On September 15th, the Foreign Minister, His Excellency Dr. Abdul Latif bin Rashid Al Zayani, signed the Abraham Accords on the South Lawn on the White House. Israeli and American officials arrived on the first ever direct commercial flight from Tel Aviv to Manama on October 18th. That evening, His Excellency Dr. Abdul Latif bin Rashid Al Zayani and Israeli National Security Council Director Meir bin Shabat signed a joint communique on the establishment of diplomatic, peaceful, and friendly relations between the Kingdom of Bahrain and the State of Israel. Government officials from each country signed memorandums of understanding regarding future cooperation in economy and trade, civil aviation, finance, telecommunications, information technologies, postal services, agriculture, and foreign affairs. Israel and Bahrain also agreed to waive the requirements for diplomats and sign an MOU on cooperation between the chambers of commerce. The first official visit of a Bahraini delegation to Tel Aviv was on Gulf Air Flight GF 972 on the 18th of November and was led by His Excellency Dr. Abdul Latif bin Rashid Al Zayani. Meetings were held with President Rivlin, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, Foreign Minister Gabi Ashkenazi, and a tripartite meeting that included Secretary of State Michael Pompeo. The results of the visit was basically the importance of the visit in achieving the aspirations of both countries and serving their interests, as well as promoting regional peace and stability. Based on the memorandums of understanding concluded between the two countries, it was agreed that starting from the beginning of 2021, 14 weekly flights will operate between Bahrain and Tel Aviv, as well as other airports, including Eilat and Haifa airports, as well as 5 weekly cargo flights. The approvals of the request of the Kingdom of Bahrain and the State of Israel to open embassies in the capitals was also approved. And the start of issuing visas has also gone ahead. Last week, we had the King Hamad Global Center for Interreligious Dialogue, and Betsy is on the line. She will talk more about that. And we had various meetings, and a MOU was signed with the Hebrew University. Today, we actually have a ministerial delegation that is led by the Minister of Industry, Commerce and Tourism, His Excellency Zayed bin Rashid Al Zayani, and he has with him around 40 businessmen who are currently in Jerusalem to further the Abraham Accords. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much indeed, Your Excellency. Much appreciated, and that you were actually there at the time and saw some of the excitement of the signing is a remarkable piece of history and something I suspect that you will always remember. It's
Alistair, I'm sorry, I think you just became muted.
okay. Can I introduce our final panelist speaker, Betsy Matheson. Betsy is a friend of many of ours, has lived in Bahrain for 40 years, though retains a distinctive accent, if I remember rightly, which we will hear. She's vice chair of the King Hamad Global Center for Peaceful Coexistence, and has also recently visited Israel for official meetings. And Betsy has been a great friend of both Bahrain and the UK over the years, and it's a pleasure to see you on this call. Betsy, please, your floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you for the introduction, generous introduction. Minister Burt, and we do miss you greatly out in this part of the world. I'd like to thank His Excellency Sheikh Fawaz Al Khalifa, our dear ambassador to London, for the invitation today. And also I pay my respects to His Excellency Sheikh Abdulaziz bin Mubarak Al Khalifa for all the wonderful trailblazing work he has done. And Con Coughlin, how lovely to see you again, Con, from sunny Bahrain. And also Her Excellency Huda Nunu, who we had the privilege of being with just a few days ago in Jerusalem. As you all know, I'm not a politician, so my angle here is really about peaceful coexistence and the right to religious freedom. I think it's an incredible journey, and we always knew that His Majesty King Hamad bin Isa Al Khalifa has always had the courage of his convictions and the vision that peace must be the objective of all civilized peoples. So we're not surprised that Bahrain has taken this bold and courageous step under His Majesty's leadership. It's why we are so privileged and honored to do the work we do at the King Hamad Global Center for Peaceful Coexistence, because this is at the heart, it's at the foundation of all of His Majesty's leadership philosophy, as you all know. And when we consider all the incredible opportunities that now come the way of the people in our region as a result of the Abraham Accords, we see a strengthened economy, we see opportunities for travel and tourism, we see technology, innovation, entrepreneurships, education, culture, wonderful relationships. But for me, I'm very interested in the fact that now religious freedom can be truly embraced by all peoples of the region. Because for Muslims in our region to be able to go to the holy sites, especially Al-Aqsa Mosque, and to fly, inshallah, very soon with Gulf Air starting their direct flights in January, is a very big step forward. And I was very heartened that whilst Bahrain's foreign minister was there some time ago now, in Jerusalem with Secretary Pompeo and the Israeli Prime Minister, Secretary Pompeo spoke about the importance of the Abraham Accords and what it would bring to the region. But he also stressed that it would also bring religious freedom to those who had been waiting more than 70 decades, not just for peace within their peoples, but peace within their hearts, to be able to visit the mosques, the churches, and the temples freely. When we consider that in today's world, there are 8.6 billion approximately of a population around the world, and some 80% of the people in this world, and that's 6.8 billion people, still do not enjoy religious freedom. They either have no religious freedom at all or live under severe restrictions. And we know from experience that when you give people the religious freedom, that it builds on all sorts of other prosperities in life. And in the Kingdom of Bahrain last December, we launched the Religious Freedom and Business Foundation, because big companies around the world, from America to the Far East to Europe, are now embracing the fact that religious freedom brings greater prosperity in businesses. And so again, this is something Bahrain has had for centuries. We naturally stop when people have a break to go to the mosque or to the Hindu temple in the souk. It's normal to be able to come to work and talk about your religious festivals, to wear a crucifix or whatever your religious symbol may be. A very basic thing, one might think, but it means that people are more productive and happier and more stable at work. And I think that one of the most important things that the King Hamad Global Center for Peaceful Coexistence has achieved recently is that we had the signing of the MOU with the United States State Department Special Envoy for Combating Anti-Semitism, Mr. Ellen Carr. And the spirit of this MOU, which was the first of its kind in the world by any country, but also the first Arab country, is guided by the spirit of the Kingdom of Bahrain Declaration, which was written by His Majesty and launched officially on July the 3rd, 2017. And this is a very powerful document, which is being embraced now around the world, because it evokes all sorts of human rights, not just the human right to religious freedom. And in that document, the King Hamad Global Center accepted the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance's definition of anti-Semitism. Again, a historic thing to do, the first Arab country to do so. And we were so heartened when a few days later, the Union of Global Imams saw that they said, well, we are now going to embrace that. And 1,000 imams embraced this. So the path to peace is there. When we take that first tenuous step, it gives courage and heart and hope to others. And so we're heartened that with the economic and the formal governmental ties between the countries in the region, that you will have what President Rivlin, during a short audience where he received us in the last few days, he spoke about the beauty of religious freedom, of course, but he also said, well, we have had previous peace accords in our region with another 2 countries, but they were cold peace. They were not the warm peace that we now see, because people are ready for peace. The people of our region want peace. In fact, they're demanding it now. The young people deserve it. They deserve the hope, and they deserve to have a future which the last 72 years, 7 decades of hopes that were dashed and conflict that continued can be erased, and young people can take their place on the world stage. And it's why the King Hamad Global Center focuses on youth education, bringing young people together to embrace each other's understanding of the other, and peaceful coexistence is a natural flow. I thank you for the time today, and I'm waiting for interest to hear more from the esteemed panel. Thank you so much.
Betsy, thank you very much indeed. The previous panelists have covered a wide range, from the politics of the region, the bilateral interest of Bahrain and Israel, and going beyond the politics into the peaceful coexistence and religious tolerance that Betsy's just spoken of. I've been asked to say a few words in terms of a United Kingdom response to this. So if participants would permit me to do so before I turn to the questions. A couple of questions have come in already on the Q&A, and we will come to those. But let me respond to the panelists and request to say a little about where I think the United Kingdom sees these accords. Firstly, I think my sense was that the UK would recognise that these accords represent a degree of reality in the region. It is not that contacts between Israel and Gulf states were unknown before the accords were signed. They were there. They were there for a variety of reasons, economic and security, but they couldn't be brought forward. What the accords do is recognise that the world has moved on, as all our panelists have indicated, and that it is not in the interests of all in the Middle East for there to be a complete paralysis of politics because of the difficulty in resolving the issue between the Palestinian people and Israel. And so I think our first instinct was to consider this represents reality. If you look to the future and see a Middle East which will need stronger economies, the demographic push in the Middle East is a young population looking for jobs. If you think of the Israeli economy plugged into the emerging economies in the Middle East, free passage between people and goods and ideas right away across the region, it could have such an impact. And we all know that in the end, those who have evil intentions will often prey on the economic difficulties of those who are left out. So to see the region moving ahead and Israel fully plugged in to the Arab states is of obvious benefit to all. The security of the region obviously increases if Israel's protection is through its relationships with its neighbors rather than external forces, then again, that adds to the overall stability. So I think the UK sensed that this was a recognition of reality and an opportunity to move forward. Secondly, I think the reality of the way in which coalitions are emerging in the Middle East. As to say, the issue between the Palestinian people and Israel is no longer the only political issue in the region. Thomas Friedman in the New York Times put it well, I thought, when he said there are 2 coalitions in the region. One, a coalition of those who want to use the future to bury the past, and those who want to use the past to bury the future. And I think we're all unashamedly on the side of the former, to want to use the future to end the issues that have dominated for so long and find a way forward. And thirdly, I think the issue on religious tolerance is really important. And I remember Dr. Gargash of the UAE speaking about this, as others have spoken today, and making the point that anti-Semitism is delivered a real blow through Muslim nations embracing Israel. And the point of that throughout not only the region, but the rest of the world is really important if anti-Semitism can no longer be used in the way it has been to foster terror and the like. So that these Muslim nations, Islamic nations embracing Israel and moving forward makes a profound difference there. But coming back to the issue of the Palestinian people and Israel, I should leave no one in any doubt that this issue remains of great importance to the United Kingdom. The United Kingdom sees the resolution of this, from everything that I'm aware, as a national security issue. This is an issue which doesn't go away or dissolve. It won't just be managed. It does need to be brought to a conclusion, a just conclusion for the Palestinian people, and a conclusion which leaves a secure Israel. It is not impossible to do. And what the Accords do is present a new opportunity in which to do this. That the Accords came at a time to deal with the proposed annexation of territory by Israel, which had been strongly opposed by virtually the rest of the world beyond the United States and Israel, made a profound difference. It kept, as all the proponents of the Accords have said, the opportunity for the two-state solution to remain available on the table and be worked on. I think the United Kingdom welcomes that opportunity. We can see also in the process having been started by the bravery of those represented today as an opportunity for others in the process. But I think the United Kingdom anticipates that that process of normalization will probably come as part of a further negotiation involving the United States, Israel, Palestinian leadership and others as to what needs to be done in order to resolve the situation and move forward. I think the situation of Saudi Arabia will be of some significance and probably a revived Arab peace initiative as well. But I think the United Kingdom sees a great opportunity here, which has been forged by those who have been brave enough to sign the Accords. And indeed, the United States' policy on Israel and the Palestinian has not always been supported by the United Kingdom. But for having provided this opportunity, which I very much hope a new administration will take. So I think the UK sees very much this as a chance to be seized. There is I was speaking with an Israeli leader yesterday, a former Supreme Court judge, former Attorney General, and he spoke about a ripeness of time, a season for things to be done that had been seized upon, and he put it in those terms. And I think that would be shared by all our panelists today, and even by those not necessarily of literal minds in the Foreign and Commonwealth Office or State Department, but those who recognize the practicalities of the opportunities that are there. So I think that's all I would like to say on behalf of the United Kingdom's position, as far as I am aware of it. But I think it is as optimistic as others have suggested. Before I come to the questions that have already been lodged, I just had a couple to add of myself. I wanted to ask His Excellency Sheikh Abdul Aziz, in relation to that bilateral position between Bahrain and Israel, what your hopes might be for that economic cooperation and what might be open, bearing in mind the need for economies in the region to grow. What can be achieved through the step that's been taken by Bahrain with Israel in this particular sense? Your Excellency, the floor is yours. And Your Excellency, you need to unmute, sir.
Here we go.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, so before I actually answer your question, Alistair, if you allow me, you know, what a wealth of ideas and amongst all of us who have spoken here today, we could do with, you know, and one of the issues that has been upsetting me recently is that when I go to the Jerusalem Post and read the comments, and you hear about the grumblings if this peace is actually real, and here in our part of the world, people are still doubting whether we made the right decision. I think there's a lot for us to do in terms of swaying public opinion in order for us to convince them that this is the right thing to do. And whether it's about religious freedom, like Betsy has explained quite rightly, because me as a young child, I remember the matriarch of the Jewish family in Bahrain, Nadima, who might come and visit my mom when I was a youngster, and she would say, you know, come and say hello to your auntie Nadima. And Bahrain has never shied to go out on a limb when we signed the facilities for the American naval base over 70 years ago. So what I'm trying to say is that we have our work cut out in going out there and convincing both the countries like UAE and Bahrain especially, and the Israelis, that we come in peace, in real peace, and that there are a lot of benefits. To address your question, look at the challenges. I'm not talking about just security challenges. I'm talking about desert farming. I'm talking about water agriculture. I'm talking about energy. I'm talking about tourism. There is just so much that we can learn from each other. We both come from an arid part of the world, and there is so much that we could cooperate in. And for those naysayers out there, we need to come out and prove that what we've done is the right decision, and actually negotiate within the room, around the table, the same table. We are going to fight for the Palestinians as much as they would in order for them to live in dignity. Now, that does not compromise in any way Israel's security or Israeli borders, or, you know, we are not where we were when the many opportunities that have come and gone for the Palestinians, and we don't have those opportunities anymore. But what we can do is try and have an outcome for the Palestinians that the young leaders of the Palestinian movement can actually say to the old guard, you know, enough is enough. We will accept a reasonable peace offer that we think that can make our lives continue in a more dignified manner. And at the same time, the Israeli young leaders should also be able to come up and say that these Arabs mean real peace, and therefore we should accept them with open arms. And therefore, I just don't want these Abraham Accords to be hijacked by those pessimist people that might jeopardize and do whatever they can, because whether it's on the Israeli side that they don't believe us, or they're not convinced that the Arabs are actually here for real peace, and to the Palestinians who also might feel that we have betrayed them, which we haven't, because we've given them ample of time to come up with a solution. Now let's all get together and work towards the same goals.
Thank you very much. I wanted, if I may, to put some of what you say to Con Coughlin, and also use a couple of the questions that I have in the box. But the two questions. Firstly, on the new coalitions, what you spoke about in the area, and we spoke about Iran and Iran's influence in the area. I've got a question on Iran from Hassan Al-Hassan of IISS, a research fellow there. And he says, in light of the recent assassination which was condemned by the Arab Gulf states, including Bahrain, of the nuclear scientist in Iran. To what extent can the Arab Gulf states and Israel coordinate a common response to the threat posed to them by Iran? And to what extent, Con, do you think the Iran leadership can in any way move to accommodate the concerns, not just of the United States, but of those regional states that have been threatened by Iran in the past? Does Iran have it in it to do that? And a second question, to use your expertise in the region, is indeed on the Palestinian question, and to pick up on what His Excellency Sheikh Abdul Aziz has said, that opportunity for a new leadership to come through amongst the Palestinians to replace an old leadership which has struggled to say yes to opportunities. What do you think the chances of that are? And David Jones, my friend David Jones, was asking about, you know, whether or not annexation has really gone away, and if it doesn't, what chance there will be for a peace settlement to be found. From your knowledge of the region, what's your feel about both those issues? Thanks very much. Muted, please, again, Con.
There we are.
There you go.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right, big questions. On Iran, I mean, I think we've got the Iranian elections coming up in June next year. And I think so far as Iran's concerned, we still have the age-old struggle between the so-called moderates, who do, I think, generally want to have a better relationship with the outside world, with the Gulf states, with the West, and then the hardliners. Now, of course, the murdered Iranian scientist was a brigadier general in the Revolutionary Guard Corps, and was deeply involved in a lot of the activities that are hostile to the interests of the Gulf, to Israel, to the wider Western world. The reason the hardliners have been pushing to revive the nuclear program is that they say the engagement that the moderates spearheaded, that led to the JCPOA, which was, from Iran's perspective, designed to get the sanctions lifted, has failed. The sanctions are back on. They're even harder and more unpalatable than they were before. So the hardliners can say with some justification, well, you know, we told you so, and we need to pursue our own destiny. And of course, they have the backing of the supreme leader and the whole sort of constitutional arrangement that denies access for genuine reformers in Iran to have their voices heard. You know, there's been a succession of anti-government protests that have been brutally suppressed in recent years. From the Gulf's point of view, clearly, the more unified the Gulf states are in rising to the current Iranian challenge, the better. But as we all know, there are fractures in the Gulf alliances for various reasons. And of course, Israel has its own concerns about Iran and its links with Hezbollah, etc. And of course, Iran's move into Syria and all the missile systems it's set up there. So it is a very complex picture. So, you know, while I was stressing the positives of the Abraham Accords, I think there are many challenges that lie ahead. And I think the role of the Biden administration, given that the Trump administration has been instrumental in getting the Abraham Accords off the ground, I think Biden will need to think very carefully about whether he wants to jeopardize the progress that has been made so far. As for the Palestinian leadership, I think this is a big issue. I think the reason, as I said earlier, that the whole peace dynamic went by the wayside for the last 2 decades or so is because the Palestinian leaders have been very divided. I don't personally think it's very helpful that Turkey has decided that it's going to play peacemaker between the old Fatah leadership and the Hamas leadership. And I think, you know, you struggle hard to see a young generation of Palestinians coming through.
I think that's indeed been a concern, because the reality is that a new set of leaders is probably needed in order to take the next steps that are possible. I'm turning back to the questions that have been raised, and I'd like to invite both Her Excellency Huda and also to Betsy to comment on this question from the Board of Deputies of British Jews that has come in, Talia Ingleby, and she asks, there have been many missed opportunities for peace between Israel and the Palestinians with various far-reaching offers. What do Your Excellency see as the biggest obstacles? And I wonder whether, and she also asks, what role can faith-based institution religious groups play in promoting peace between Israel and the Arab world? And bearing in mind Bahrain's reputation for religious tolerance, which we've all seen when we visited there, that question from the Board of Deputies of British Jews is particularly significant. So perhaps I could ask that to both Her Excellency and Betsy. What role can faith-based institutions play in promoting peace between Israel and the Arab world, especially in building trust? Your Excellency, would you like to take that first?
Yeah, thank you, Talia, for your question. Bahrain, as everyone has already said, it has always been open to religious freedom. It's nothing new. It's something that we have been ingrained with from being children. I think the institutions and religious groups, the main role they can play is basically to inform basically other countries and other organizations what Bahrain's role has always been. It's always been out there and it's always been open. Because we are an island, we have always welcomed people to come in from abroad. What we're actually doing is it's Abraham Accords is not. We've never really been at war with Israel. It's more we've never really had an issue. So it's not like Jordan and Egypt where they have been at war and it's a peace agreement. With us in Bahrain, it is the Abraham Accords, which is basically recognizing Israel and moving that step forward. But in recognizing Israel, our aim is also to include the Palestinian people and bring them on board. I'll pass it on to Betsy.
Yes, please, Betsy. What do you think about the role of such institutions in helping with this?
Well, I think that for religious faith groups, building trust, I think that first of all, that initial trust is already there because we are all people of faith when you're talking about faith groups. Look, in the Kingdom of Bahrain Declaration, His Majesty's opening words are, ignorance is the enemy of peace. So we must therefore live together and share our life stories and live by the tenets of our faith. Now, look, people have said, oh, why did you sign something about anti-Semitism so easily and readily? My question is, why not? Because we are all a Semite people in our religion and our region. And the thing is, today it's an attack on anti-Semitism on the Jewish community. Tomorrow it's an attack on the Muslims. We all know the persecution of Christians is at an all-time high around the world. And I think that, you know, we cannot ignore any longer the importance of religious freedom and human dignity. I hate to use that T word, tolerance, and Ambassador Sheikh Fawaz will be laughing because this is my big thing. In the Kingdom of Bahrain, we don't simply tolerate people of other faiths or beliefs or ethnicities or cultures. We warmly embrace them as part of the one family spirit there. And this is not a sudden new PR exercise for the Kingdom of Bahrain over the last few years. We have evidential history of peaceful coexistence, going back millennia, when one considers that there are highly documented incidences since the 4th century AD, when the Nestorian merchant Christians fled persecution in the Byzantine Empire, and they arrived in Bahrain because Bahrain offered them sanctuary. We still uncover every day archaeological evidence to support this. There was a cathedral there, churches there, a bishop there, and this has never changed in the Kingdom of Bahrain. This is in the building blocks of the DNA of every Bahraini. Peace and love is the only way they know how to live. Mutual respect is something that is second nature. And by the way, it's also one of the reasons that I believe that the Kingdom of Bahrain has had a success rate in coping with COVID-19, apart from the very swift and decisive action taken by His Majesty at the earliest stages. Because we do respect our neighbors and each other, I think that this is the spirit. Now, on my recent visit to Israel, I have to say, for those of you who are not aware, it was not my first visit to Israel. The precursor to the King Hamad Global Center was an NGO that we founded called This is Bahrain, which has been around for 10 years. And in 2017, in December, a couple of days after President Trump's historic announcement about the relocation of the United States Embassy, I took a delegation of religious leaders at the invitation of the Simon Wiesenthal Center to Jerusalem. Now, everyone expected us to cancel that visit in light of recent events. But our approach was, well, if every time a world leader or president or politician made a decision and we stopped our work, we would never get anything done. We could not further the cause of peaceful coexistence, because that politician can be out tomorrow, that decision can be rescinded the day after, whereas the message of peaceful coexistence and the importance of it on a global basis will not change. And when we were there, we met with all communities, Palestinians as well as Israelis. And they all said, thank you for coming. Because people to people, the desire, the deep-rooted desire for peace has always been in their hearts. And now when we return 3 years later to meet some of those same people that we met, and we've been working, we sowed those seeds 3 years ago. We've been working on building that trust that the young lady asked, the question that was asked. It doesn't take much to open that door, just a small crack, and let that light of hope into the hearts of everyone. It's already there. And I have to share something with you which really touched my heart in this visit. As we were leaving, and Ambassador Huda will know what I'm talking about. As we were leaving the audience with President Rivlin, where he spoke so warmly and beautifully about the importance of the recent developments, leaving the magnificent surroundings, the gardens where he had statues of all the previous presidents of Israel, I looked over at the main exit gate, and there on a small apartment building across from the president's house was a banner that said, a crude homemade banner that said, all we ask is give peace a chance. Now that's how the people on the streets feel in Israel. It's a message we got 3 years ago, but now it's more profound. And it's the same here in the Kingdom of Bahrain. Our young people deserve hope. And that's why the King Hamad Global Center works on building educational programs to combat the ignorance of the other, to remove the fear that extremists and radicals can prey on, to radicalize our young people. We're building trust through sharing our experiences. And we have been working with the United Kingdom on this for quite some time. We have created a program called the King Hamad Faith and Fellows Leadership Program in conjunction with St. Bennett's Hall at Oxford University. And this is for young people to come together of all religions and learn leadership skills, to give them the confidence and the skills and the knowledge to take their place in the world stage today.
Thanks.
We also created, there's also a university degree, Alistair, forgive me, I just want to get this last point in. The King Hamad Chair in Interfaith Dialogue and Peaceful Coexistence at Sapienza University in Rome. A BS, a master's and a PhD in this subject. And we have just had the first PhD graduate from this program who wrote her thesis on the history of the Hinduism in the Kingdom of Bahrain, as the temple's over 200 years old. Religious freedom is not a freakish thing. It's not for people who are religious freaks. It's for everyone who has the smallest bit of faith in their heart, because it will help to build that trust. And I defy anyone to read the Kingdom of Bahrain Declaration and not find that hope and peace and inspiration somewhere in their hearts. Thank you.
Betsy, thank you. I know it's a full answer, but I know how important it is. I remember seeing the declaration in the hall of the United Nations when I was there for a General Assembly not too long ago. So it is important. An hour runs away very quickly and we are at the end of it. So I do have to bring it to a conclusion. I wanted just to ask you, if I may, just for one comment from Sheikh Abdulaziz, if I may, and then ask His Excellency the Ambassador to close. But it represents a couple of questions on the that we've had. My friend Jonathan Shaw has asked about the relationship with Iran as well, and also Sandeep Singh Grewal has asked a question to me, but I think it's more pertinent for His Excellency Sheikh Abdulaziz. Do you think the incoming Biden-led administration should invite Gulf countries to sit on the table of negotiations with Iran and present their views for a full understanding of the matter? So if we're to get anywhere, Iran may not always be treated as the other, it has to move. But if we're going to see any progress from the United States, unlike JCPOA, regional states are surely going to need to sit around the table. So Your Excellency Sheikh Abdulaziz, would you just like to make a quick comment about upon that? And then I must go back to His Excellency the Ambassador just to close what has been an excellent session and to thank all my fellow panelists for their remarks.
Yes, just to cover those points briefly, if you remember, we were actually quite upset when the Obama administration went ahead and signed the agreement without even informing the neighbors of Iran on what the details of that agreement was. And so if we're not there at the table with Iran, we should at least be put in the picture and actually know what's going to go in any kind of agreement being made. Being the neighbors of Iran, we need to know who we're going to be living next to. But as you can see, unfortunately, Iran is the other country. And even so, we condemned the assassination of the recent nuclear scientists, because that's just, we don't condone assassinations in any form. So we're standing on the right side of history. We're standing on the right side of peace and security. Iran is our neighbor. We need to live next to Iran. However, Iran has to move in a big way.
Your Excellency, thank you very much indeed. And I've enjoyed being on the panel with such distinguished and well-qualified speakers. Forgive us that we've not had more time to answer the questions that have come in, but time does run on very quickly. Your Excellency, Mr. Ambassador, you've hosted us for the session. Please, would you like to bring it to a conclusion? And you will also need to unmute, sir. Thank you. Unmute, sir.
Thank you, Alistair. These are certainly very interesting times that we live in. Certainly, there is a lot to do and there's a lot to achieve going forward. I think we've heard our panelists mention a few challenges, but I think we've got to be optimistic. We've got to be realistic as well in our expectation. And I think we are looking forward for the results of the 3 Bahraini visits to Israel so far, and looking forward for Prime Minister Netanyahu's visit to Bahrain soon. So these are very interesting times for us to live and to witness, and hopefully there are a lot to achieve as well. So I would like to thank my panelists, participants, speakers for your input today, and looking forward to another webinar of this sort maybe in the near future. So thank you very much.